Hello, my name is Jordan Whitaker, 32 years old. I live in San Francisco, where the steep streets lead you to new horizons, where the morning fog embraces the bay like a whisper from the ocean. I am a tech entrepreneur, the founder of a startup focused on developing digital solutions for the healthcare industry. My company, MediSync, has made significant strides, bringing me over $50 million in assets, a number that sometimes even I find hard to believe. But don't let those figures fool you. My life hasn't always been as dazzling as the lights from the Golden Gate Bridge. Behind those successes is a long story, full of scars I've never wanted to revisit, especially when it involves my family. I grew up in Minnesota, in a small town called Stillwater, where the winters were so cold you could feel your breath freeze in midair. My family, my parents, and my younger brother Lucas ran a textile company founded by my grandfather, Whitaker Textiles. That company was once the pride of the town, with high-quality rolls of fabric exported far and wide. But that's a story of the past. Now Whitaker Textiles is on the brink of bankruptcy, and I know exactly why. Poor management, my father's stubbornness, my mother's excessive spending, and Lucas's preference for partying over working. They live in a bubble of complacency, believing the Whitaker name alone is enough to save them from any trouble. I left Minnesota right after high school, carrying an old suitcase and a heart full of hurt. My family never truly understood me. My father, Henry Whitaker, always saw me as a rebel just because I dared to question how he ran the company. My mother, Eleanor, loved me in her own way, but that love often came with emotional manipulation. And Lucas, my brother, 3 years younger, was once my best friend when we were kids. But as we grew up, he chose the easy path: parties, luxury cars, and debts he thought I'd cover for him. We haven't had a proper conversation in years. San Francisco is where I rebuilt myself. I studied computer science at Stanford, working day and night to turn MediSync from an idea on paper into reality. My company helps hospitals optimize processes, reduce patient wait times, and improve care quality. Every time I receive a thank you email from a doctor or a patient, I feel like I'm doing something meaningful. But success hasn't filled the void in my heart. I still keep my distance from my family, not because I hate them, but because every conversation feels like they're pulling me back to a past I don't want to return to. Ever since MediSync started gaining recognition, my family seems unable to leave me alone. It all began 3 years ago when a Forbes article called me a rising star in the healthcare tech industry. Since then, my phone hasn't stopped ringing with calls from Stillwater. First, it was my mother, her voice sweet but calculated. "Jordan, you're doing so well," she said during a late-night call as I sat in my office overlooking the San Francisco Bay. "I'm proud of you, but you know your father's company is struggling. If you could invest just a little, we could save your grandfather's legacy." I gripped the phone, trying to keep my voice calm. "Mom, I've said it before. I don't want to get involved with Whitaker Textiles. The company needs a solid plan, not just money." She sighed, a sound I knew well as a sign of her disappointment. "Jordan, you don't understand. This is family. You can't turn your back on us." Calls like that kept coming week after week. My father was more direct. He sent long emails listing debts and demanding I contribute to preserve the family's reputation. He wrote as if I owed him, as if my success was a gift I had to share with them. Lucas, on the other hand, was bolder. He texted, called, and even showed up unannounced in San Francisco once, wearing an expensive suit I was sure was bought with an overdrawn credit card. "Bro, just a couple million," Lucas said during that visit as we sat in a crowded cafe in the Mission District. He smiled, but his eyes were tense. "You've got tons of cash, right? Help us out this once and you won't have to worry anymore." I looked at him, the brother I used to build snow castles with in our backyard. Now he saw me as a walking ATM. "Lucas, I'm not the family's bank," I replied, my voice firmer than I intended. "If you want my help, show me a business plan, a real one." Lucas shrugged as if I'd said something absurd. "Bro, this isn't Silicon Valley, this is family. We don't need those plans. I left the cafe that day with a heavy heart. They didn't understand me, and maybe I didn't understand them either. But what bothered me most was how they used our grandfather's legacy as a weapon, as if I'd be a traitor if I didn't pour money into Whitaker Textiles. I knew the company was sinking, bank debts, outdated machinery, clients leaving. But I also knew throwing money at it wouldn't fix anything. They needed change, but they didn't want to hear that from me. Everything came to a head on a Tuesday morning as I sat in my office in downtown San Francisco. The room had large glass windows overlooking the bay where container ships glided silently by. I was reviewing the latest quarterly financial report when my phone rang. It was my mother. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the screen. She rarely called at this hour, and every time she did, I knew something bad was coming. "Jordan, is that you?" Her voice was frail, halting. I'm not well. The doctor says I might have had a heart attack. Can you come home? I need you." My heart clenched. Despite all our conflicts, she was still my mother. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Which hospital are you in? I'll arrange things right away." "St. Mary's in Stillwater," she replied, her voice trembling. "Come soon, Jordan. I don't know how much time I have." I hung up, feeling like the world had slowed down. A heart attack. My mother was only 58, still young, but she always had a knack for exaggerating. I wasn't sure how much to believe, but the thought of her being in real danger made it impossible to stay put. I called my assistant, Sarah, and told her to cancel all my meetings for the week. "I have to go to Minnesota," I said, my voice stiffer than I intended. "Family stuff." Sarah nodded, asking no questions. She knew I didn't like talking about family. Within 2 hours, I'd booked the earliest flight, packed a few clothes, and headed to the airport. As the plane took off, I looked out the window, watching San Francisco shrink, and a sense of unease rose in my chest. I wasn't just returning to Stillwater to visit my mother. I was walking into a storm I'd been avoiding for years. Stillwater greeted me with the familiar chill of a Minnesota autumn. The cobblestone streets, the wooden houses with white picket fences all looked like a peaceful painting. But I knew the truth behind the facade. I rented a car and drove straight to St. Mary's Hospital. On the way, I tried calling Lucas, but he didn't pick up. Neither did my father. Part of me wondered if this was a trap, but I pushed the thought aside. My mother was in the hospital. I couldn't let old suspicions stop me from doing the right thing. St. Mary's Hospital was a low, beige-painted building with long hallways and a strong smell of disinfectant. I found my mother's room on the 3rd floor. She lay in bed, her silver hair neatly combed but her face paler than usual. My father stood by the bed, arms crossed, while Lucas sat in a chair scrolling through his phone. When I walked in, all three looked up and I felt a heavy tension in the air. "Jordan!" my mother cried, her voice weak but emotional. She reached out and I stepped forward, taking her hand. Her hand was cold, but her grip was tight, as if she feared I'd disappear. "Are you okay?" I asked, my eyes flicking to my father and Lucas. My father nodded but avoided my gaze. Lucas shrugged, still glued to his phone. "The doctor says your mother needs rest," my father said, his voice low. "But she's worried about the family, about the company." A chill ran down my spine. The company, of course. They couldn't wait a second longer to bring up Whitaker Textiles. I tried to stay calm, turning to my mother. "Mom, just rest for now. We'll deal with the company later." But she shook her head, her eyes glistening as if she were about to cry. "Jordan, you don't understand. The company is your grandfather's legacy. If it collapses, I don't know how I'll go on." Lucas finally looked up, giving me a look that was half challenging, half pleading. "Bro, we really need you. Just a small investment. You've got the money, right?" I clenched my fist, trying not to let my anger flare. "Lucas, Mom's in the hospital. This isn't the time to talk about money." "But that's why she's like this," Lucas shot back. his voice rising. "She's worried about the company, about the family. If you help, she'll get better." My father put a hand on Lucas's shoulder, signaling him to quiet down, but his eyes bore into me with pressure. "Jordan, you're the family's only hope. You can't turn your back on us." I felt suffocated. I came here for my mother because I thought she was in real danger, but now I realized I was being pulled into a drama they'd orchestrated long ago. I looked at my mother, searching for a shred of sincerity in her eyes, but saw only desperation, not for her health, but for the company. That night, I stayed at a small hotel near the hospital. I didn't want to go back to the old house filled with memories I'd tried to forget. Lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. Was my mother really having a heart attack? Or was this a ploy to force me to invest in Whitaker Textiles? I knew the company was drowning in debt, but I also knew my father and Lucas couldn't save it. They only wanted my money, not my actual help. I opened my laptop, pulling up old emails my father had sent, asking me to contribute to the company. The numbers they quoted kept growing, but they never included any concrete plans. I shook my head, telling myself I couldn't let emotions override reason. But the image of my mother in that hospital bed haunted me. What if she really needed me? What if I refused and something terrible happened? The next morning, I returned to the hospital. My mother looked better, but still played up her frailty. My father and Lucas weren't there, leaving just me and her in the quiet room. I sat by her bed, trying to keep the conversation gentle. "Mom, I want you to get better," I said. "But I need you to be honest. Is the company really so important that it made you like this?" My mother looked at me, her eyes glistening. "Jordan, you don't understand. The company is your father's whole life, the family's. If you don't help, I'm afraid everything will fall apart." I nodded, but inside I'd made a decision. I would agree to invest, at least in name, to appease them. But I would also find out the truth. But I knew that if my family was manipulating me, I needed proof. And if the company was truly in trouble, I wouldn't let my grandfather's legacy collapse without a fight. Later that day, I called an old friend, a private investigator named Mike Callahan. Mike had helped me vet an untrustworthy business partner a few years back. "Mike, I need your help," I said. "I want to know exactly what's going on with my family's company. Everything." Mike chuckled over the phone. "Jordan, I know you. When you call, it's usually something big. Send me the details and I'll get started." I hung up, feeling a slight sense of relief. I didn't know what I was about to uncover, but one thing was certain. I wouldn't let my family manipulate me anymore. Stillwater might be where I was born, but I was no longer the boy they could easily sway. I am Jordan Whitaker, and I'll see this through to the end, even if it means confronting my own flesh and blood. The days that followed saw me at the hospital frequently, looking after my mother. And then I stumbled upon a truth that left me reeling. My mother hadn't had a heart attack. I confirmed this with a kind nurse named Clara, who inadvertently revealed that my mother had only requested further monitoring, despite all her tests coming back normal. The doctor said she could go home, but she insisted on staying in the hospital for observation. The reason for her act was nothing other than to pressure me into agreeing to invest in Whitaker Textiles. A sense of betrayal began to weigh heavily on my chest, but I didn't let it deter me. My family had staged an elaborate performance to trap me. And though I'd uncovered their scheme, this time I wasn't running away. I was determined to resolve this once and for all. I was exhausted by my parents' and brothers' endless manipulations. I agreed to invest in the company, at least nominally, to placate my parents and Lucas. But it was merely a strategic move. I wasn't the naive 18-year-old Jordan they could easily manipulate anymore. I was the person who had built Medisync from nothing, faced formidable competitors in the business world, endured sleepless nights, and made life-or-death decisions. If my family thought I was still gullible, they were gravely mistaken. It was time for me to act. But I needed to do so discreetly, intelligently, and without leaving a trace. I started by reaching out to Mike Callahan, the private investigator I'd contacted earlier. Mike was a man in his 40s with salt and pepper hair and eyes sharp enough to see through any lie. We arranged to meet at a bar on the outskirts of Minneapolis, far enough from Stillwater to avoid recognition. The bar was dimly lit, smelling of stale beer with soft jazz playing in the background. Mike sat in a corner, a beer and a small notebook in front of him. "Jordan," Mike nodded as I sat down. "You look like you just ran a marathon. What's going on?" I took a deep breath and recounted everything. The relentless calls from my family, my mother's feigned illness, and my growing unease about Whitaker Textiles. "I need to know what the company's doing, Mike. Not just finances. I want everything. How they operate, how they treat workers, any secrets they're hiding." Mike raised an eyebrow, jotting notes quickly in his notebook. "Textile company, right? Places like that often have dark corners. Anything specific you suspect?" I hesitated, trying to organize my thoughts. "I'm not sure, but my father has never been transparent about money, and Lucas, he spends like it falls from the sky. I'm worried the company isn't just poorly managed, there might be something illegal." Mike nodded, his expression serious. "All right, I'll start by looking into the company's records, maybe talk to some former workers if I can. I'll also check for any lawsuits or complaints. But Jordan, if there's something dirty, are you sure you want to dig deeper? This is your family." I looked out the window where a light rain began to fall. "I don't have a choice, Mike. If I don't get to the bottom of this, they'll keep exploiting me. And if the company's really in trouble, I don't want my grandfather's legacy tarnished." Mike shrugged, taking a sip of his beer. "Fair enough. Send me the details about the company, name, address, any employees you know. I'll get started, but stay calm. Don't let your family suspect anything." I nodded, feeling a weight lift slightly. But I knew this was only the first step. Mike could find leads, but I needed more evidence, and I couldn't just sit and wait. Back in Stillwater, I began my own investigation. I hired an independent auditor named Rachel, an old friend from Stanford known for her knack for spotting financial irregularities. Rachel agreed to review Whitaker Textiles' books without my father's knowledge. To make it happen, I told my father I needed a financial assessment before officially investing, a request he reluctantly accepted. "Don't you trust me, Jordan?" he asked over the phone, his voice laced with suspicion. "It's not that, Dad," I replied, keeping my tone light. "I just want to make sure everything's transparent. If I'm investing, I need to know where my money's going." He was silent for a moment, then agreed. "Fine. But don't drag this out. The company needs the money urgently." I hung up, feeling like I'd just stepped through a dangerous door. I sent Rachel the documents my father provided: financial reports, supplier contracts, and employee payroll lists. But I knew those could be doctored. I needed something more authentic. One rainy evening, I drove to the Whitaker Textiles factory. The building sat on the edge of town, an aging brick structure with weathered walls and dusty windows. I parked in a secluded corner, turned off my headlights, and watched. It was past 9 p.m., but light still spilled from one section of the factory. I saw a few workers leaving, their coats pulled over their heads, hurrying through the rain. They looked exhausted, their shoulders slumped as if carrying the weight of the world. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but my gut told me the factory was hiding something. I stepped out of the car, pulling my coat up to shield my face, and quietly walked along the fence. The rain soaked my hair, but I didn't care. I stopped near a side door where the hum of machinery still echoed from inside. Through a crack in the door, I saw a group of workers, mostly women, many of whom didn't look local, working under flickering fluorescent lights. A man, likely a manager, paced back and forth, barking orders I couldn't quite hear. I pulled out my phone, switched to video mode, and tried to capture the scene, but a noise behind me made me jump. I turned to see a security guard patrolling with a flashlight. I quickly ducked behind a nearby container, my heart pounding. The beam of light swept over where I'd been standing, and I held my breath, praying not to be spotted. Luckily, the guard moved on and I quietly retreated to my car. Back at the hotel, I reviewed the video. The quality was poor, but it was enough to show tired faces and hands moving swiftly in dismal conditions. I sent the video to Mike with the note, "Check who these workers are. I suspect something's off." A few days later, Mike called back. His voice was low, as if he was trying to stay calm. "Jordan, you were right. I talked to a few former workers and they told some ugly stories. Whitaker Textiles is hiring undocumented immigrants, mostly from Central America. They pay below minimum wage, offer no benefits, and the working conditions are abysmal. Some said they were threatened if they dared complain." I gripped the phone, anger surging. "Does my father know about this?" "Not clear yet," Mike replied. "But the factory manager, a guy named Carl Hansen, definitely knows. I've also heard rumors of company funds being funneled into personal accounts. I'm working on getting proof, but it'll take time." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "Thanks, Mike. Keep digging. I'll handle the rest." Around the same time, Rachel emailed me. She'd reviewed the books and found multiple irregularities, unexplained expenses, fake invoices, and transactions transferring money to offshore accounts. "Jordan, this isn't just bad management," she wrote. "There are signs of embezzlement. I need more data to confirm, but be careful." I felt the ground crumbling beneath me. My father, who always preached about family honor, might be exploiting workers and stealing from the very company he swore to protect. And Lucas, was he involved? I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was piling up. Over the next few weeks, I lived on edge. By day, I played along with my father and Lucas, attending meetings about investment plans. I smiled and nodded, but my mind was on what Mike, Rachel, and I were uncovering. At night, I pored over emails, reports, and pieced together the information. One evening, Mike sent me a file, fake employment contracts, cash payroll receipts, and a recording of Carl Hansen threatening a worker. "This is gold, Jordan," Mike wrote. "But it's not enough to take down the whole company. We need direct evidence tying your father or brother to this." I read through the documents, my heart constricting. Those workers, people far from home, toiling in harsh conditions, were being treated like tools. And as much as I hated to admit it, I was part of the family that let this happen. I called a lawyer in San Francisco who had helped me with Medisink's legal issues. "If I have evidence of labor violations and embezzlement, what can I do?" I asked. The lawyer, a calm man named David Cohen, replied, "If the evidence is strong enough, you can report it to the labor authorities or the police. But consider the consequences. The company could be shut down, and those involved, including your family, could face jail time." I nodded, though we were on the phone. "I understand. I'll get back to you when I have more." That night, I lay in my hotel bed, staring at the ceiling. My grandfather's face came to mind, a stern but fair man who built Whitaker Textiles with sweat and dedication. What would he think of his company now? A hollow shell of corruption? And what was I, his grandson, doing to fix it? I closed my eyes, feeling like I was at an irreversible crossroads. I had gathered significant evidence, but I still needed the final piece, something directly linking my father or Lucas to the wrongdoing. I knew I was on a dangerous path, but I couldn't stop. Not now, when the truth was so close. The days that followed passed in a haze of tension and preparation. I continued to play the role of the dutiful son, attending meetings with my father and Lucas, nodding as they spoke about saving Whitaker Textiles with my money. But I was no longer just going along with their plans. Mike finally found the missing piece, an internal email between my father and Carl Hansen, the factory manager, discussing cutting labor costs by hiring more undocumented immigrants. The email not only confirmed that my father knew about the illegal practices, but also showed he had approved them. The board meeting was scheduled for a Friday morning at Whitaker Textiles headquarters. This was the day my father, Lucas, and the board members believed I would sign the papers, pouring millions of dollars into saving the company. They didn't know I had a different plan, one that would change everything. That day I walked into the meeting room carrying a black leather briefcase containing all the evidence Mike, Rachel, and I had gathered. The room was filled with people. My father sat at the head of the table, his face stern but his eyes glinting with hope. Lucas sat beside him, dressed in a suit but with no tie, looking like he'd just come from a party. The board members, mostly old friends of my father, whispered among themselves, clearly expecting good news. Carl Hansen was there too, sitting in the corner, his gaze sharp like a wolf's. "Jordan," my father said, his voice deep and authoritative, "are you ready? Today is a big day for our family." I smiled, a practiced smile I'd rehearsed in the mirror to hide the fury boiling inside me. "Yes, Dad. Today is very important." I placed the briefcase on the table, unlocked it, but didn't take anything out yet. I looked around the room, sensing the mix of anticipation and tension. They thought I was a naive lamb, ready to hand over money to save their sinking company. They had no idea I was about to drop a bomb. "Before I sign any papers," I began, my voice calm but sharp, "I'd like to share a few things I've learned about Whitaker Textiles over the past few weeks." My father frowned but nodded. "All right, Jordan. What do you want to say?" I pressed a button on the remote in my hand, and a large screen behind me lit up. The first image was the video I'd recorded that night at the factory. Exhausted workers, flickering fluorescent lights, and Carl's barking voice. Murmurs began to ripple through the room. Carl sat up straighter, his face paling. "This is our factory," I said, my voice steady. "These people work 12-hour days, sometimes more, for less than minimum wage. Many of them are undocumented immigrants, threatened if they dare speak up." My father slammed his hand on the table, his voice thick with anger. "Jordan, that's enough. What are you doing? This is a meeting to save the company, not to smear it." I didn't stop. I switched to the next slide, a scanned email between my father and Carl with a highlighted line. "Keep hiring the undocumented. They're cheaper and no one cares." The room fell into a deathly silence. My father stared at the screen, his face hardening like stone. "Jordan," he said, his voice trembling, "where did you get this? It's fake." "Fake?" I replied, my voice cold. "I have the entire email chain, Dad, and this isn't the only thing I found." I displayed more. Transactions with Lucas's signature on several documents. Lucas shot to his feet, his face flushed. "What are you saying, Jordan? You think I'm stealing money? This is our family's company." "Yes, Lucas," I said, looking him in the eye. "Our family's company. But what have you and Dad turned it into? A place that exploits workers, embezzles funds, and breaks the law?" The board members began murmuring louder, some casting suspicious glances at my father and Lucas. Carl tried to interject. "Mr. Whitaker, you've misunderstood. This is just how we compete." "Shut up, Carl," I cut him off, my voice louder than I expected. "I have worker testimonies, videos, and documents proving you threatened them. Do you want me to send it all to the police right now?" Carl went silent, slumping back in his chair. My father looked at me, his eyes a mix of anger and desperation. "Jordan, you're destroying your family. Do you realize that?" My heart tightened. His words cut like a knife, but I couldn't let them sway me. "No, Dad," I said, my voice low but firm. "You and Lucas are the ones destroying our family, and I won't let you drag me down with you." I pulled a thick stack of documents from the briefcase and placed it on the table with a resounding thud. "This is everything I have. Emails, transactions, testimonies, videos. I've been working with a lawyer and an investigative journalist. If you keep pushing me to invest, I'll send it all to the authorities. But because you're family, I'm giving you one last chance." The room erupted. One board member, Mr. Peterson, stood up, his voice shaking. "Henry, is this true? Is the company really doing these things?" My father didn't answer, just lowered his head, his hands clenched into fists. Lucas, on the other hand, shouted, "Don't believe him. Jordan just wants to ruin the company because he hates our family. He abandoned us years ago." I looked at Lucas, and for the first time in years I saw him not as my brother but as a stranger. "Lucas," I said, my voice almost a whisper, "if you want to save the company, start by taking responsibility. But you can't, can you?" Lucas opened his mouth to retort, but then sat down, his face pale. The board members began arguing, some demanding explanations from my father, others whispering about withdrawing to avoid being implicated. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Some board members left, muttering about contacting their lawyers. My father remained seated, silent, as if his entire world had just collapsed. Lucas glared at me, his eyes full of resentment, but said nothing more. I stood in the middle of the room, feeling like I'd just fought a battle. But I wasn't done. I turned to my father, my voice softening but still resolute. "Dad, I don't want to destroy our family, but I can't let Whitaker Textiles continue like this. The company has to change, not just for the law, but for the people working for it." I listed my demands, each word like a hammer strike. End the use of undocumented labor, pay fair wages, improve working conditions. "And Dad, Lucas," I continued, "stop pressuring me to invest. If you want to save the company, do it yourselves. I won't be a lifeline for your mistakes." My father finally looked up, his eyes weary. "You think I don't want to save the company, Jordan? But you don't understand. Things have gone too far." "I do understand," I replied, "but you have a chance to make things right. Don't make me do something none of us want." I turned to Lucas. "And you, if you really care about the family, start acting like a man, not a kid who just spends money." Lucas didn't respond, just lowered his head. I didn't know if my words reached him, but I hoped, even just a little, that he might change. As I left the meeting room, I felt like I'd walked through a storm, my body exhausted but my mind still racing. I had exposed the truth, putting my family at an irreversible crossroads. But I didn't want to destroy them. As painful as it was, I still wanted Whitaker Textiles, my grandfather's legacy, to be saved, not with my money, but through real change. I would help my father and Lucas, but on my terms. The days following the board meeting passed in a heavy atmosphere, but I wasn't about to give up. Through my investigation, I had uncovered the core issues plaguing Whitaker Textiles. A virtually non-existent marketing strategy, outdated production technology, and financial management that was a tangled mess. If the company was to survive, it needed a complete overhaul. And I knew I couldn't do it alone, not because I lacked the ability, but because I didn't want my family to think I'd always be their lifeline. They needed to learn to stand on their own. I called Julian Morgan, a close friend from Stanford who was now a renowned business consultant, known for his knack for reviving struggling family businesses. Julian had once helped a winery in Napa escape crippling debt, and I believed he could do the same for Whitaker Textiles. "Jordan, you're calling me in the middle of the night, so this definitely isn't about grabbing coffee," Julian said over the phone, his tone half joking, half serious. "What's up?" I told him everything, from the company's violations to the confrontation at the board meeting. "I need you to help my family," I said. "Not because I want to save their reputation, but because I don't want my grandfather's company to collapse. But they have to do most of the work themselves. I don't want them relying on me forever." Julian was silent for a moment, then chuckled softly. "You haven't changed a bit, Jordan. Always putting principles above emotions. All right, I'll come to Stillwater next week. But I'll need your father and brother to cooperate. If they don't want to change, my hands are tied." "I'll convince them," I replied, though I wasn't sure I could. "Thanks, Julian." I returned to the old family house one autumn afternoon when golden leaves covered the driveway. The house was just as I remembered. White wooden walls, a gray shingle roof, and the faint smell of my mother's apple pie wafting from the kitchen. But the warmth that once filled the air was gone. My father sat in the living room, surrounded by a stack of papers, his face weary. My mother stood by the window, gazing out at the garden, silent. Lucas wasn't there, and I felt a quiet relief at his absence. "Jordan," my mother said, her voice trembling, "why are you here? To keep blaming the family?" I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "No, Mom. I'm not here to blame anyone, I'm here to help, but not with money. I want the company to be saved, but Dad and I have to change how we work with Lucas. My father looked up, his eyes full of suspicion. Help? After everything you did at that meeting? You've got the whole town whispering about your family? I clenched my fist but kept my tone steady. Dad, I'm not trying to destroy our family, but I can't let the company keep exploiting people. If we want to save Whitaker Textiles, we have to do it right. I've contacted a friend, Julian Morgan. He's a business consultant. He can help us rebuild strategy, restructure operations, and get the company back on track. My father shook his head, his voice bitter. You think an outsider can save the company I've run my whole life? No, Dad, I said, looking him in the eye. I think you can save it if you're willing to change. Julian's just a guide, but you and I have to do the work. My mother stepped forward, placing a hand on my father's shoulder. Henry, listen to Jordan. We have no other options. If the company collapses, we'll lose everything. My father was silent, his eyes wavering between anger and despair. Finally, he nodded, though reluctantly. All right, call your friend Julian, but Jordan, if this doesn't work, it's on you. I nodded, feeling like I'd just cleared a major hurdle. Julian arrived in Stillwater a few days later, bringing with him a contagious energy and a thick plan. We met at a small cafe in town where he spread out a stack of documents before me. Market analyses, proposals for new technology, and a strategy for a sustainable brand building. Your family's business has potential, Julian said, his voice brimming with confidence. But they've missed too many opportunities. If they follow this plan, Whitaker Textiles could not only survive but thrive. I felt a spark of hope, but also unease. I tracked down Lucas at a bar in the center of town where he sat alone with a glass of whiskey. He looked haggard, his hair disheveled, dark circles under his eyes. I sat across from him, silent for a few seconds. Come to preach again, huh? Lucas asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. No, I replied. I'm here to talk about the future. Lucas, you can keep blaming me, Dad, or the whole world. But if you want to save the company, you have to step up. I've called a friend, Julian. He can help us, but I need you to be involved. Not as someone who just spends money, but as someone who actually wants to change. Lucas looked at me, his eyes flickering with uncertainty. You think I don't want to save the company, but you weren't here, Jordan. You left, leaving us with this mess. His words hit like a punch, but I didn't let them shake me. Yes, I left, but I'm here now, and I'm giving you a chance. Are you going to take it? Lucas lowered his head, gripping his whiskey glass tightly. After a moment, he nodded. All right, I'll try. But don't expect me to thank you. I smiled, though it was a sad smile. I don't need your thanks, I just need you to work. Julian began working with Whitaker Textiles the following week. He organized meetings with my father, Lucas, and a few loyal managers, presenting the restructuring plan. Upgrading machinery, adopting sustainable weaving technology, and building a brand focused on exports. He also emphasized improving working conditions, paying wages on time, providing benefits, and ending the use of undocumented labor. My father, though initially reluctant, started to cooperate. He attended meetings, asked questions, and even offered a few ideas based on his experience. I saw him change, slowly. Not the stubborn father I knew, but a man realizing he had no other choice. Lucas, meanwhile, was awkward at first, but gradually became more diligent. He learned to read financial reports, attended Julian's training sessions, and even visited the factory to talk to workers, something he'd never done before. I supported them quietly from afar. I secretly covered part of the cost for upgrading machinery, but asked Julian not to tell anyone. I didn't want my family to think I was buying their forgiveness. One evening, I visited the factory to check on progress. The old flickering fluorescent lights had been replaced with brighter LEDs. New machinery was being installed, and the workers, now paid properly, looked less exhausted. I met a woman named Maria, one of the workers who had appeared in my video. She thanked me, her eyes glistening. We don't have to be afraid anymore, she said. Thank you, Mr. Whitaker. I shook my head, feeling a lump in my throat. Don't thank me, thank yourself for staying and working here. As I left the factory, I saw Lucas standing outside, smoking a cigarette. He looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw a hint of sincerity in his eyes. Jordan, he said, his voice hesitant, I'm sorry for everything. I paused, unsure how to respond. Finally, I just nodded. Prove it with your actions, Lucas, that's all I need. I returned to San Francisco, but stayed in touch with Julian. Over the next few months, I received regular updates from him. His emails were optimistic yet grounded, detailing the progress at Whitaker Textiles. The company had fully replaced its outdated machinery with modern equipment and adopted sustainable weaving technology to meet international market demands. Julian also designed a new marketing strategy, positioning Whitaker Textiles as a symbol of quality and social responsibility. They're doing well, Jordan, Julian wrote in one email. Your father's still stubborn, but he's learning to listen. And Lucas, he's surprising me. I read Julian's email in my office, gazing out at the San Francisco Bay shimmering under the sunset. Lucas surprising Julian? I wasn't sure if I should believe it, but the thought made me smile. I sent Lucas a brief text. Heard you're doing well. Keep it up. He didn't reply immediately, but a few hours later I received a simple message. Thanks, bro. Just 2 words, but to me they carried the weight of a promise. That winter, my mother called to invite me back to Stillwater for a family dinner. Jordan, you have to come, she said, her voice warmer than it had been in years. Our family needs to be together. I'm sorry for everything that happened. I heard sincerity in her voice, and for the first time in years I felt a gap between us begin to close. I agreed, though I still carried a hint of caution. I flew to Minnesota on a clear day with snow blanketing Stillwater. The family house felt warmer than I remembered, adorned with twinkling Christmas lights on the porch and the scent of pine from a Christmas tree in the living room. My mother greeted me at the door, hugging me so tightly I could barely breathe. You're home, she whispered, her eyes glistening. I was afraid you'd never come back. My father stood behind her, his gaze softer than I'd ever seen. Jordan, he said, his voice low. Thank you for everything. I nodded, not wanting to let emotions sweep me away. Lucas emerged from the kitchen wearing a simple sweater, no longer sporting the flashy demeanor of his past. He smiled, an awkward but genuine smile. Bro, he said, I've done some stuff. Wanna see? I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Lead the way. Lucas took me to the Whitaker Textiles factory not far from the house. When we stepped inside, I hardly recognized the place. The old weathered walls had been repainted, bright LED lights replaced the flickering fluorescence, and new machinery hummed smoothly. The workers were busy, but they had smiles on their faces. Maria, the woman who had thanked me before, waved from a distance. Mr. Whitaker, she called. Thank you for the new machines. I nodded, smiling back. Lucas led me to a corner of the factory where a large sign stood reading, Whitaker Textiles, Quality and Fairness. Below it was a list of commitments, fair wages, health insurance, and safe working conditions. This was my idea, Lucas said, his voice slightly shy. After you shook everything up, I thought we needed a reminder of what Grandpa believed in. I looked at him, feeling like I was seeing the Lucas from our childhood again, the boy who used to follow me around the backyard. You did good, I said, placing a hand on his shoulder. Grandpa would be proud. Lucas grinned, a real smile, not the boastful kind he used to flash. I'm still learning, but I want to do it right. That family dinner that night was a moment I'll never forget. We sat around the dining table under the warm glow of the old chandelier. My mother had made my favorite potato casserole from childhood. My father shared stories about Grandpa's early days running the company, and Lucas, for the first time in years, didn't have his eyes glued to his phone. We laughed, we talked, and though no one mentioned the painful months we'd been through, I knew we all felt the wounds beginning to heal. Jordan, my father said over dessert, his tone serious. You were right. I was wrong to let things go so far. I'm proud of you. I swallowed hard, surprised by how much his words moved me. I just wanted to do the right thing, I replied. For Grandpa, for the company, and for our family. My mother took my hand, her eyes shining. You did more than that, Jordan. You brought our family back together. Over the next 2 years, Whitaker Textiles didn't just survive, it thrived. The company secured major contracts with retailers in Europe, thanks to Julian's export strategy. They built a sustainable brand focused on recycled fabrics and eco-friendly production. Revenue grew steadily, and more importantly, the company became a source of pride for Stillwater. Workers were paid on time, received health insurance, and even organized a community appreciation event where Lucas publicly apologized for past mistakes. My father changed the most. He learned to use modern management software, took courses recommended by Julian, and started listening to workers' input. He was no longer the stubborn father I once knew, but a leader who could admit fault and adapt. Lucas, meanwhile, became my father's right-hand man, working tirelessly to prove he was no longer the reckless partier. He even started a training program for young workers, helping them learn new skills. My mother, with her knack for connection, became a community liaison. She organized charity events, donating a portion of the company's profits to support local schools. Once, she sent me a photo of her and Maria at an event, both beaming. "This is what you made possible, Jordan," she wrote. "Thank you." As for me, I continued running Medisync, taking the company to new heights. We expanded into international markets, and I received an Entrepreneur of the Year award from a tech magazine. But my greatest success wasn't the numbers or the accolades. It was the feeling of knowing my family had found each other again, not through money, but through forgiveness and effort. One evening, I flew back to Stillwater for Whitaker Textiles' 75th anniversary celebration. The town was aglow with lights, and the factory was decorated like a festival. Workers, residents, and even international partners were there. Lucas stood on a stage, more confident than ever, thanking everyone for their trust in the company. "We made mistakes," he said, his voice clear. "But with our family and this community, we found the right path." My father pulled me onto the stage, despite my protests. "This is Jordan," he said to the crowd, "my son who saved Whitaker Textiles, not with money, but with courage." The crowd applauded, and I felt my face flush. I wasn't used to moments like this, but as I looked down and saw my mother smiling, Lucas nodding, and the workers' faces glowing with trust, I knew I'd done the right thing. Back in San Francisco, I sat in my office gazing at the bay. I thought about my journey from a boy who left Stillwater with a broken heart to a man who found his family again through painful trials. I learned that family isn't about perfection, but about those willing to own their mistakes and move forward together. And I, Jordan Whitaker, had found a balance between my principles and my love for those closest to me. Our story didn't end with a perfect conclusion, but with a new beginning. Whitaker Textiles wasn't just a company. It was proof of the power of forgiveness, change, and compassion. And as I looked out at the San Francisco horizon, I knew that no matter what lay ahead, I would always carry Stillwater in my heart.